There's also another kind of purpose that motivates people, which is a smaller kind of purpose, not less significant, but just a quieter kind of purpose, which is, hey, I helped that customer solve their problem. I'm a cook and I made a decent meal and that person over there, human being, ate it. I'm a solar panel installer and, maybe I care about solving the climate crisis, but you know what? I helped out this family right here because I reduced their energy bills. And I think that's a really, really important kind of purpose. None of that is good. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose are not going away. They are part of the human condition.
Hi, I'm Nick Hague, and welcome to the world's greatest business thinkers podcast. Today, we're truly privileged to have with us an author whose work has fundamentally reshaped how we think about motivation, creativity, and the very nature of work itself. Daniel Pink is a master of translating deep behavioral science into powerful, actionable ideas for leaders and individuals alike, and has certainly influenced my career with his many books. He's the author of 7 best-selling books, including Drive and To Sell Is Human. His books have sold millions of copies, been translated into dozens of languages, and his TED Talk on motivation is among the most viewed of all time. His latest work is perhaps the most human and profound yet. It's a book that tackles a universal emotion we all strive to avoid and brilliantly reframes it as a vital source of insight and clarity. It's called The Power of Regret, How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward, and I know you're going to love this discussion. If you do, then as always, please do follow and subscribe wherever you listen or watch, and you'll never miss another episode. Welcome to the world's greatest business thinkers podcast, Dan.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I want to start today by exploring what young Dan was like. You've spent the majority of your career being curious about why people do what they do, but were you always curious as a child? And what do you think sparked this curiosity inside of you?
I'm not sure, Nick. I think that most kids are curious. And so I don't think that my being curious as a kid is anything defining or unusual. I think that the more interesting thing is, how did I not manage to get it completely beaten out of me? and that took some time. If there was anything formative, if there's anything predictive in my childhood of what I would end up doing with my adult life, it was that I grew up in a place, it's the state of Ohio in the Midwestern part of the United States. And I happened to grow up in a place that had an excellent public library system.
Right.
And as a consequence, I spent a lot of time at the library when I was a kid, because I liked it. And I think that I always suspected that had I grown up in a place that didn't have as robust a public library system, I might not have become a writer. But it was, so I think that sort of situational, environmental thing mattered more than anything else in sort of what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Well, for those of you that are on the YouTube channel, you can see it looks like you're in a library there, Dan. So
this is my garage. This is my office in my house. I mean, I get, as you can see, I'll give you a little, I have a big wall of books, and then I have behind me this giant pile of books that come in. So maybe my childhood is predictive of my interior design choices.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I grew up in Manchester, and we have got the most fantastic central library. I don't know whether you've ever been to Manchester, England.
I have, yeah.
There's a fantastic library there. It's a gorgeous building, and I look at it. I look at it now, and and I go in it now. I never did as a kid. I was very different in the fact that I didn't really read many books until I was in my 20s, and I read the odd novel, of course, but nothing really grabbed me. And then I was given a copy of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it just resonated with me as an individual, and the work at the time that I was doing. And since then, I've just loved books, probably self-help books more, which is why I'm a superb fan of yours. So, delighted to be speaking to you today.
Yeah.
No, go on, Dan.
No. I think it is interesting. I think there's some. I think there's we can sometimes over-index on explaining people's childhood as a predictor of what people end up becoming as adults. And I think that one way we over-index on that is we put too much weight on the the choices that parents make, which we have a lot of evidence that it doesn't really matter all that much. But the kind of environment and situation that you're in actually seems to matter a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've already mentioned you grew up in Ohio, and then you went on to study law at Yale, but you didn't take this traditional pathway that maybe your parents thought you would with law, and instead
Yeah.
began working in politics and economic policy. And I'm really intrigued because you made this switch. And ended up as chief speechwriter for Vice President Al Gore at the time. So how did that all come about?
I mean, without any planning or strategy is the short answer to that story. You know, here in the states, law is a graduate degree. It's a professional degree. So you go to university, and then then if you want to if you want to pursue a certain kinds of professions, you go and get a medical degree or a law degree or a business degree or something like that. And I was always told. I mean, again, we're going back to kids a little bit. When I was growing up, there was pretty much the path was you needed to have a kind of profession in order not to be, impoverished. And
Yeah,
so, because I don't know, because I read a lot or because I was a good talker or something like that, the assumption was that I would go to law school, and I basically just bought that assumption. And then I had a sort of somewhat tortuous experience sort of going through law school, but I went to law school having no idea what lawyers actually did. I mean, it's kind of
right.
ridiculous. I mean, it's actually really ridiculous. And once I figured out what lawyers actually did, I said, "There's no way I'm doing this." And it's real. It's not. Well, it's kind of grim. But I didn't have the guts simply to leave. As many as several people have this kind of realization that I had. I
Yeah,
didn't actually have the guts to abandon it entirely. I stuck it out, and I even took the bar exam, which is sort of the certification exam for becoming a lawyer here in the
yeah,
States. And anyway, I was just to make a long story longer, I was one of three people in my law school class who graduated unemployed. And
right.
so, so I went out but at the time I was actually keenly interested in politics. So I had a deep interest in politics, and I said, this is what I want to do. And so I ended up working on campaigns and political campaigns, which I liked because there's a beginning. They're project based. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's an outcome. So it's interesting. It's fun. It's exciting. And in doing that, I just somehow became a speechwriter, and and that's what happened. And the advantage was that I was pretty good at it, and the other advantage is that not that many other people did it, and so there were a lot of opportunities available, and that's how it happened. But there was no way that I had this deep intention or strategy or goal to do that. It just happened in a kind of a half-assed way.
Yeah. Well, I suppose as we have our years behind us, we can always look back and know that, can't we? That you never know where life takes you.
Right, exactly.
You need to grasp life, seize those opportunities that cross your path when they do come. Um,
And I think there's a big. I mean, again, I know that you have listeners who are in university now, and I think that there is a lesson there. I'm not 100% against planning. No way. I think there's something to be said for planning, but I also think there's a danger in planning too much, and because life is so unpredictable, and our forecasting skills are not great. So we don't know what the world is going to be like in 5 years or 10 years. But
yeah,
also, we don't know what we're going to be like in 5 years or 10 years. And so if you had talked to me, I don't know, 30 years ago, or you had talked to me when I was in university, and you said, when you become a grown up, you're going to be sitting in a garage by yourself writing books. I would say, that doesn't sound that fun, but that's what I ended up doing, and it is fun.
well, and likewise, I went through university as a geologist. Never went down that route, piecing puzzles together from information. Ended up growing an agency, market research agency, asking people questions. And here I am stuck in a study. And what would podcasting be if you spoke to me 30 years ago?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if you, exactly. If you told the childhood, if we told the 13-year-old Nick, you're going to become a podcaster, he would say, "What the heck is a podcaster?" So someone, I mean, there was, we're going to be talking today on a December morning here in the States, afternoon where you are. And in the newspaper, I still read a print paper, there's a story about how young people in universities are all majoring in artificial intelligence, which is understandable and great. But, the story also said that 8 years ago, they were majoring in computer science, and now nobody's majoring in computer science. So, I think that kind of unpredictability gives us some clues about how we make our life choices, which is that we should do things for fundamental reasons, for intrinsic reasons, rather than trying to constantly game the system. Not because there's some kind of moral weakness. There's a moral problem in trying to game the system. It's just that the system's really hard to game because it's too complicated and unpredictable.
Well, you mentioned there about looking for clues on what the future looks like, and indeed, you took the leap. So we've just talked about it. You ended up as chief speechwriter, but you took the leap into writing with your first book. It was called Free Agent Nation, and this was 2001. So this was definitely ahead of its time. So. First, with lots of questions around this, what gave you the confidence early in your career to bet on this book, but understand those trends that were happening in 2001, that, what were the clues that were coming through that allowed you to write that first book and bet on it?
Yeah, I mean, those are two different questions. They're interesting questions. I'm not sure I've reflected on either one that much, actually. The first question has to do with how did you have the confidence to go out on your own? And, I'm not sure. I've always had a decent amount of confidence, just because it's a strange kind of confidence, Nick, because it's, you look around, and I don't look around at other people and say, I'm so much better than all these people. But I also don't look around and say these people are all better than me. I'm like, okay, these people are good, and I'm probably, I can hold my own with them. That's it. So it's not this kind of overconfidence saying I'm better than everybody else. It's just like, look around. It's like, oh my God, these people can do it. I can probably do that too. Listen, working in politics is a good
ground,
a good way to learn that. So you walk through the Senate or House office buildings, and you see the people who are allowed to make policy for the United States of America, and you're like, okay, like I kind of belong. It's like I'm kind of glad I'm here because a lot of these people are morons, and so I guess that's what it was. But in terms of the risk that I took going out on my own, it was actually a very calibrated risk, for a couple of reasons. Number one was that my wife did not leave her job at the same time. She did not, and here in the States where most people get health insurance through employers, she did not give up her health insurance. So we had an income coming in, and we did the math. And so that was one thing. The second thing was that I had a fallback in the sense that I knew that if I did this for a couple of years, tried to go out on my own for a couple of years and it failed, I could go back and get another job. It wasn't like I was going to be permanently unemployed. And so it was a very kind of calculated risk. The other thing is that, and I think one of the things that I'm reasonably good at is that I'm pretty frugal. And so when I said I went out on my own, I didn't go rent an office downtown. I didn't print up business cards. You know what I did? I took my laptop, crappy laptop at the time, now that I think about it, but I took my laptop and went to the attic of her house. And I took 2 file cabinets and put a used door on top of them as my desk. Okay, so I'm not spending a lot of money on this. And here I am today in a garage office. I've never paid rent to anybody. So I think it's a combination of, saying, hey, I'm not better than anybody else, but I'm not worse than anybody else,
Yeah.
and being actually very conscious of risk and calibrating it that way. So that's I think that's the answer. Now, you had another question about how did I pick up on these signals. I think it's because there are a couple of things going on. One was that I spent a few years working at the U.S. Department of Labor, working for the labor secretary, the labor minister in the States. And so I was always interested in that issue and was always reading and paying attention to what was going on. And the other thing that I did was, when I went out on my own as a free agent, I looked around and there were other people doing this, and no one was talking about it. And there were businesses popping up to serve these people, and there were new forms of engagement for these people. And I was like, and so it's really a case of just like looking around. And again, back to your early question, just being curious. And at some level, I think also extrapolating from your own experience. That's perilous sometimes, but other times, it's worth doing, because there's a very complicated principle of social science that says that most people are like most people. And so I'm like most people. And so it's like, wait a second, I'm doing this. I'm not that much of a pioneer. So, and I look around my neighborhood and I look at other people, and other people are doing this. I'm like, hey, I think there's something going on here. So that's all that it was.
Yeah.
There was no epiphany. There was nothing like that.
Well, yeah, no, but you definitely saw something. So if I think back to 2001, you were doing probably the research, a couple of years before that, before the book launch. So
Yeah.
I set up my previous agency in 1998, and I'm thinking,
around the same time.
What was life like then? I definitely didn't have a laptop back then. Everything was desktop. If we're going into the late 2000s, I didn't even have a BlackBerry.
No. I mean, listen, there was not, when I start, at that point, there was not widespread broadband. I mean, there were still dial-up connections.
Yeah.
But there was a sense that, I did have a sense that there was something going on. I didn't know exactly what, but I was curious enough to try to find that out. And we've seen these things before. I mean, it was enabled by the forces of this free agent world were enabled by technology. At the time, the internet was relatively new, or new as a mass medium. But you also had, throughout the industrial world, this idea that employment was not going to be permanent, that for a certain amount of time in the 1980s and early 90s, people said, "Oh my God, they just fired me. I've been working here for 20 years. They can't do that." And then by the late 90s, people were like, "Yeah, they can." And I'm not going to be loyal to people who aren't loyal to me. And I can actually maybe be more secure going out on my own, especially since we have these new tools that allow me to do it more capably.
Yeah. Well, and here we are, December 2025, going into 2026, but we're looking back over 2 decades. And, we've seen the explosion of the gig economy, remote working, creator economy. I think we can safely say that your thesis was right, Dan. And in what ways do you think the reality of today's free agent is different from that you talked about, 20 odd years ago?
Well, certainly again, let's go back to the technology. Think about the technology that we're using right now. At some level, that was unimaginable.
Yeah.
In let's say 2000, 25 years ago, 2000. The idea that you and I would be having this essentially seamless, real-time video conversation would have seemed, whoa, that's kind of amazing. What's more, the idea that you could then record this conversation and distribute it worldwide on video and audio to anyone on the planet. They're like, no, that can't be right. And we're not even done yet. And the idea that that laptop that I had in those early days would be a joke compared to this supercomputer that I keep in my pocket that is connected to everyone on the planet. I mean, it's almost, it's like, whoa, it's kind of, so technology enabled that. Yeah. And I don't think it necessarily drove it. I think the relationship between individuals and organizations has permanently changed, that it was in the midst of changing then. And so if I were to say in that book, oh, you know what, the bargain at work has changed. So it used to be that organizations gave security and individuals gave loyalty, but that bargain is breaking down. If I were to say that to my kids, they would say, what? Of course, that's what, when was that ever true? That organizations would give you any kind of long-term security. And so I think that that's become more permanent. The other thing I think is pretty interesting and perhaps unexpected is that at the time, a way to think about the world of free agency, especially, again, here in the States, was that we had this world of free agent nation and we had this world of corporate America. And they were essentially kind of a cold war between the two. And that if you did what I did and left, and not really corporate America, but sort of traditional work America, if you left that world and went to go work for yourself, it was over. You essentially had renounced your citizenship in that previous world. But now it's much more fluid. People can move. People often move back and forth. Nobody thinks about it. You can go interview for a job at a company and say, "Oh, I was 10 years. I was self-employed," and they might even say, "Oh, wow, it's like this guy must be good because he supported himself for 10 years without a corporate paycheck." What's more, right now, if I have a neighbor who is working remotely and who doesn't expect to be at the company forever, they're kind of like me, So there's been a blurring of the boundary between these two worlds that I would not have expected then. So again, this goes back to our forecasting skills. We can pick up on weak signals in our world and say, hey, there's something going on. Let's try to figure out what it is. But when we forecast too far, we have no idea.
Yeah. Well, that was 2001. And
yes,
and actually, I first came into contact with your work in 2009. You were on stage. It was at Excel in London. I remember it well. You were introducing your new book at the time, Drive. I was a career market researcher looking for stories in data, a bit like you, so connected in that way we were. But the depth of research you carry out to verify the facts, the way that you blend science and storytelling, Dan, to make these complex ideas accessible, I just love. And in Drive, you laid out this case that really hit me at the time for motivating others. You talked about autonomy, mastery, purpose, this intrinsic motivation, rather than historically what would maybe seen as carrot and stick approach.
Yeah.
So again, 15 years on, the rise of remote working, AI. Do you think these three motivating factors, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, are they still there? And is one more effective than the other?
I think they are still there, just because those are powerful human motivators. And so those as motivators are not going anywhere in terms of what humans beings want out of life. It's a more complicated question about whether organizations are going to promote those. But I do think that the world has changed a little bit in that direction. Not a huge amount, but a little bit in that direction. So when we think about, autonomy is a great example. I actually wrote about remote work in Free Agent Nation. In Free Agent Nation, I said, there's a kind of natural affinity between work and home. And so more and more people, even if they're not actually self-employed, are going to end up working at home because, Peter Drucker said this 60 years ago. Why do we have to send a whole body 45 minutes downtown and then 45 minutes back when all you want is the 3-pound brain? And people said I was nuts. Like, there's no way, you can't trust people to do that. It'll never work. And then we have the pandemic, and literally hundreds of millions of people across the planet figure out how to do it in a week and then stick with it for a couple of years. Like, that's a pretty good test case for autonomy. and as they say in my home state of Ohio, that is a very difficult egg you can't unscramble that egg.
Yeah.
And this is why you have a lot of the backlash to some of this return to some of this return to office policy.
Yeah.
And so autonomy is always going to be there. Now, let's talk about the other ones, mastery. Because I think that these autonomy, mastery, and purpose, they're less linear than they are things that are dynamic and work together. So let's talk about mastery here for a second. There was just a paper out the week that you and I are talking about how making a pretty good case for some pretty good evidence, at least, for why being in the office enhances mastery. Because of the proximity to people who, especially for younger workers, proximity to people who can be helpful in guiding your career. And so it's like, and I think we're all around the world, we're figuring this out, that we're moving to a world that is going to be essentially permanently hybrid. To the point where, and I think it's happening already, people are not even calling it that anymore. They're not even calling it hybrid. They're just calling it work. Essentially, what you do is you say, you have stuff to do. You have things to accomplish. Where you do it is going to vary based on the task you're doing, based on where you are in a stage of life, based on what kind of company it is. And we're just going to trust people to figure out the best place for them to do it. So for the young people in your audience, as much as I believe in autonomy, I do not recommend that you take a fully remote job early on, straight out of university. I don't think that's a good idea. At the same time, I think that you do want to look for a place that gives you a great degree of autonomy. So maybe you go to the office 4 days a week and are on your own 1 day a week. But I think we're going to get to. I think we are moving to the point where we're in a work world that is essentially permanently hybrid, so deeply that we're using that word hybrid less and less and less.
Yeah. Yeah. And then purpose, what's your thoughts around purpose? Because the way I see, I've got two kids, 16 and 20, and they're looking for more and more purpose in, where they're looking to work. My eldest looking for, placements. But I think also employees are demanding purpose from their job just the same. It may be more so these days. Do you think that's the case?
I think so. I mean, one of the things about purpose as a motivator that I actually got, I've sort of changed my thinking on a little bit is I don't think I got purpose exactly right in that book. I think I got it partially right. So when we say purpose as a motivator, in that book, I wrote about purpose essentially being that people are motivated by being part of something larger than themselves. Leaving an imprint on the world. And there's no question that is true. But there's also another kind of purpose that motivates people, which is a smaller kind of purpose, not less significant, but just a quieter kind of purpose, which is, hey, I helped that customer solve their problem. I'm a cook and I made a decent meal, and that person over there, another human being, ate it. I'm not solving the hunger problem in the world, and I'm not. I'm a solar panel installer, and maybe I care about solving the climate crisis. But you know what? I helped out this family right here because I reduced their energy bills. And I think that's a really, really important kind of purpose. So none of that is good. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose are not going away. They are part of the human condition. The open question is how much organizations, and it's their choice, want to promote those things, enable those things, or suffocate those things.
Yeah, no, I totally get that because I mean, okay, everyone wants to save the world, don't they? But in our day-to-day jobs, when I ran my agency, we collected. So it was a market research agency. It was mainly B2B. So we collected information in many different ways, mainly by e-survey, but we had a global telephone unit because we were trying to get hold of C-suite decision makers, and they're just not available on the end of an email or an e-survey. So, and it was one day when an interviewer said to me, what actually happens with these interviews or this data? And it struck me straight away that, we were very client customer focused in the fact that we were always delivering what they needed, of course, giving them insight to move with confidence in decisions. but we weren't feeding it back internally. And I think as soon as we started sharing some of the findings and back to the interviewers, the difference it made, not
Exactly.
only were we more engaged with the job itself, and they were like more detective works now. We've got to get to the nub of this objective for Nick and the team, and so it really did help that little purpose, if you like.
Exactly. That's a great example of that, and it's such a great example of that in action. And the other thing is, like, your description shows to the managers and leaders out there, it's not expensive to do that. I mean, it's you can get a lot of this stuff for free, and it has a big effect and it's pretty inexorable that people do better at their jobs when they know why they're doing it in the first place.
Yeah.
And again, so for me, I put too much emphasis on the big exalted purpose, which still matters, and I kind of neglected this other purpose. And day to day, people are more likely to find that smaller purpose at their fingertips, because as you say, Nick, I don't think most people come into work every day, no matter what they're doing, say I'm solving the climate crisis. I think there are some examples of that, and I think you can bring that in more robustly. There's an example there's a great example in this book here, which is Brene Brown's new book. I just happen to have it here on my desk.
Right, I haven't read her new book.
The where she has where I do think organizations can use that sort of bigger purpose. She talks about being at a hospital here in the States called St. Jude's, which is a hospital that is a children's hospital, essentially an oncology center, mostly for children. And and she talks about visiting this hospital and getting in an elevator or lift with somebody who is a woman who is wearing a hairnet and pushing around a cart full of food. And through the hallways, but this woman is riding the elevator, riding the lift up, and Brene says to this woman, "What do you do here?" And she says, and the woman this woman who has this job says, "I cure cancer." And so there is a great power in that big P purpose. It's just that you have to be, like so many things, you have to be ambidextrous about it. Some days you want to go for the big P purpose. Other days you want to go for the small P purpose.
That's a bit like the JFK conversation with the janitor, wasn't it? That he was helping put someone on the room when he spoke to him.
Exactly. No, it's very similar, and we have some pretty good evidence. I mean, there's a famous paper in the Academy of Management journal looking at that what JFK talking about, the very, very simple language of what we're doing here. Man on the moon. All right.
Yeah.
Not like, we're going to serve our stakeholders by celestial exploration and innovation. No, it's and those kinds of simple beacons are really, really, really important. So if organizations combine those very concrete, simple beacons with a capital P purpose, and day to day say, look what you did here. Basically what you did, Nick. Here's why what you do matters. Here's why what you do has an effect on what we do here. That's really powerful.
Yeah. No, it really did make.
And that's not going to change. That's one forecast I can make. You talk to me in 10 years, that's still going to be. That's still going to be powerful.
For sure. So I saw you on stage, Dan. Became a loyal advocate. Yours. And I'm going through the back catalogue now, but then I read your next books. To Sell is Human. This argued that everyone, no matter where you work in walk of life, you're in sales, parent, doctor, teacher, we're in the business of persuasion, influencing how people think and behave. And it resonated with me at that time. The market research agency I had, we didn't have any sales team whatsoever because we tried it, but we learned quite early on that if you're trying to sell market research to someone that doesn't need it, it's like trying to sell sand in the Sahara. You just this manipulative, pushy salesperson is not going to get anywhere. So we didn't need them, and so we just needed our research team to be good listeners, problem finders, clarifiers of the client's unmet needs.
Exactly. They were selling though.
They work. So I bought this book for me, and I encouraged all my exec team to read this book. because, it was just so powerful because we were selling, but there was just, there was a trick to the trade, I suppose, in terms of doing it. Do you well, I suppose what do you think's the biggest single misconception that people have about what it means to sell?
I think there are two. One of them is that only some people sell. And what as you were saying before, we're all in sales. If you look at the guts of what white collar workers do, a big portion of it is something that's kind of sort of like selling. They are persuading, influencing, convincing, cajoling. Hey, I want you to work on my team, not this other team. Hey, I'd rather have this project rather than some other project. So we're doing a lot that is like sales, and that was another kind of weak signal that allowed me to write that got me writing that book just out of curiosity. And the weak signal was that there were a couple of weak signals here. It might be useful. One of them was that I would look at job descriptions that were posted, and then I would look at what people actually did. It was like a giant chasm between them.
Yeah.
It's like they were describing this kind of, I don't know, it was so strange. It's like, what's going on here? It's like, that's not, it's like a bad translation in a way.
Yeah.
It's like a translation from one language to another. It's like, well, that's sort of that way, but it's a really bad translation. And I was wondering about that because I felt like what people were doing was, on the job, was a little bit more varied, a little less categorical than what the job description said. And I wanted to explore that. The other weak signal that I had, it goes to the second misconception, is that there was this idea among certain kinds of professionals, lawyers, accountants, I don't know, market researchers maybe, that the people in sales, the people who carried the bag, the people who had sales on their business card, sales in their job title, were just like, a different kind of breed. They weren't that sharp, but, they were people who were kind of gregarious and good at golf and extroverted and smiley. But they, and again, like my experience talking to people in business, and I would meet people in sales, and I'm like, wait a second, these people are super smart. These people are smarter than some of the, the brainy professionals. What's going on there? There's a gap there. And so that's what got me on there. All of which is to say, to actually answer your question, the two misconceptions are: one, only some people are in sales. We're all in sales. And second is that sales isn't what it used to be. That this idea that to be in sales, you have to be aggressive and pushy and slimy and smarmy is a total misconception. And it's a misconception rooted in changes in information, which goes to what we were talking about earlier in the conversation. That, for a long time, there was information asymmetry, that sellers always had more information than buyers. When the seller has more information than the buyer, and the buyer doesn't have many choices, and the buyer doesn't have a way to talk back, the seller can rip you off. No question about that.
Yeah.
But we haven't lived in that world.
We've all bought a car, haven't we, from the car show?
Yeah, we haven't. But even buying a car is not like buying a car anymore. know, so we haven't lived in that world for a while, and AI is changing that even more. And so the idea is like, again, I actually want to actually answer your question. The two misconceptions are that only some people are in sales. No, we're all in sales, and that to be in sales, you have to be a certain way. Kind of pushy and extroverted is just not true. And what you want to be is you want to actually deploy some very sophisticated human skills.
Yeah. And the internet, as we say, it's changed everything there. And
AI is changing it again. It's not like you look at it in my in my household. When we bought our first car, I don't know, 25 years ago, the car dealer knew a lot more about cars, a lot more about that car, a lot more about that make of car than we ever could. Buyer beware. When we bought our last car, my wife walked into the dealership with the factory invoice. I mean, literally with the factory invoice price of the car. I know how much you paid for this car. That's information parity. But now it's like, that's going to seem like child's play too, because what's going to happen in 5 years or at some point is I'm going to say, here's my family situation. I have this many kids. I have this kind of commute. I have this budget. Go out, AI agent, find that car and negotiate with the car dealer's AI agent and have that autonomous vehicle delivered in front of my house. That's what we're going to have. So even like the idea of my wife going into the car dealership with a factory invoice price. Oh God, remember the old days? That was so quaint.
Exactly. Well, I'm looking forward to that day when it comes, because I hate going in and getting all the
I don't like it either. But the other thing, again, just to push this even further, is that we're going to look back and wonder why we even let human beings drive cars in the first place.
Yeah. Your most recent book's called The Power of Regret, and it's such a powerful book.
Thanks.
It frames regret as this emotion that's treated properly. It can not only deepen our learning, but it sharpens our decisions, clarifies what we value. And it's one of these common emotions, but it's complex, isn't it? I mean, it's like, it isn't it's a feeling, because we regret we visit the past and the future, and we then make up a story about, what possibly could have happened. It really is complex.
It's very complex. I mean, cognitively, it's extremely complex because it involves time travel, and it's one of the amazing things our brains can do. We can go and we can just, you and I talked a lot about forecasting. It's like our brains can go and say, what's the future going to be like? We can imagine what the future is going to be like. We can imagine our way into that future. We can use that imagined future as a guide, as a goal, as inspiration for what we're going to do today. We can also go backward in time. We not only can we remember stuff, but we can also take this very complicated emotion of regret. We can go backward in time and say, if only I had married Jonathan rather than Edward, my life would be better. So we go back in time, we undo a choice that we made, then we get back in our time machine to the present, and the present is now reconfigured because of what we did in the past. That's very cognitively complicated, and that's what regret allows us to do. But essentially, regret is an emotion where we look back on our lives and wish we had done something different, wish we had done different things, wish we had done things differently, and it makes us feel bad. And it's but using that negative feeling can be really powerful in transforming our lives going forward.
You in the book itself, you talk about counterfactual thinking, to bring the regret story to life, if you like. And you use the example of looking at podium pictures of medal winners, gold, silver, and bronze medal winners. Can you talk a bit to listeners about that?
Sure. I mean, that's a good example. There's a pretty well known study done in the 90s showing this. And then this is one of those things in social psychology that's since been replicated several times. And the idea is this: you show people photographs of the Olympic medal podium, but you disguise what medal the athletes are wearing. And you have people evaluate their facial expressions. And not surprisingly, the people who are the happiest are the people who won a gold medal. But the slight surprise is that the second happiest people on the podium by far are the bronze medalists. And the least happy person is a silver medalist. So it doesn't go in the order of the medal. You would expect gold happiest, silver second happiest, bronze third happiest. But no, that's not how it is. And the reason has to do exactly as you say, Nick, with counterfactual thinking. The silver medalists do what's called an upward counterfactual. They imagine how things could have been better. So they say, if only I had made that turn in the 200-meter freestyle a little bit faster, I'd be having a gold medal rather than a silver medal. The bronze medalist says, "Oh my God!" They do a downward counterfactual. They imagine how things could have been worse. They say, "Oh, I'm so glad I reached for the wall when I did, because if I hadn't, I'd be stuck like the fourth place person who doesn't have a medal at all." And so what we know is that downward counterfactuals, at least I got a bronze medal. Downward counterfactuals make us feel better.
Yeah.
Upward counterfactuals, if only I had made that turn faster, they make us feel worse, but they help us do better in the long run. And regret is an upward counterfactual. So again, it's very complicated. So counterfactuals are very, very complicated cognitively. This is why kids little kids can't really experience regret until they're 7 or 8 because their brains haven't developed enough to do that kind of counterfactual thinking. It's why certain kinds of neurodegenerative disorders, people with certain kinds of Huntington's disease, certain kinds of Parkinson's disease, actually don't experience regret either, because their ability to do counterfactual thinking is interrupted.
I mean, I think you talking about 7 to 8-year-old kids there. I mean, when I was reading it, I thought, I see this everywhere. I was joining the dots, but if you like, but I was like, I see this everywhere these days. Especially in schools, everything has to be positive. People don't learn if they don't experience this negative. And I was thinking
Amen.
about sports days when my kids were younger. I was thinking back to sports days when I was younger, and there was always the disappointment. I think I got a bronze one time for a 3-legged race or something like that. But sports days these days, it's like they've stopped giving out medals to save little Johnny the disappointment of not getting one. And you see it on social media where all people are performing, and it's all about positivity. And I think that's probably why we're in the problem we are in the world today, isn't it?
There's a whole line of research in cognitive psychology about how people learn, about the importance of desirable difficulties. And if we go through life, if parents architect their kids' lives so they no longer experience any adversity or any difficulty, those kids are not going to learn. They're not going to learn nearly as much. They're not going to grow nearly as well. And when life inevitably hands them a difficulty or a disappointment, they're not going to know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I saw it was on your LinkedIn post. You put something about that, about parental advice and how to shape your son or daughter in the future, which was very telling.
It goes back to what we know from a lot of the research is that what you want to have as a parent is you want to be supportive, and you want to have high standards. And so if you are supportive without high standards, without allowing desirable difficulties, your kid's not going to grow. If you have high standards but aren't supportive, your kid is going to be a wreck of anxiety. But if you are supportive and have high standards, that seems to be the sweet spot.
Yeah. So we're talking about regret, and we're talking about it, that the fact that if we frame it as a positive, or if a learning from it, then we can really use this to progress. And you talk about this 3-step process. What is this, and how does it anticipate regrets for future decision making?
Well, what we want to do is let's say we have a regret. We want to go through a fairly systematic process. So I don't know, give me a regret that somebody might have, Nick, or one of your listeners might have, or that you might have.
Well, it's probably easier to talk about one of my regrets. I've always loved music, but I've never given it any time, and I'd love to play the piano. So it's a regret of mine. I still hope to do it one day. But,
okay, got it. Okay, so you regret maybe not learning an instrument, not learning.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, all right. So that's not like a super intense regret, but we can.
I tell you what, I'll give you a better regret then. So, growing my agency, I had to spend a lot of time. This is before remote working, before COVID. A lot of time on planes, traveling around. So I maybe I missed the odd Christmas party or Christmas play and some birthday parties my kids went to. So my regret is that maybe I should have spent and prioritized more time with the kids as they were growing up.
Okay, good one. Okay, so so let's go. So let's work through this. So first of all, I'm going to take it out of you, but I'm going to just make it just sort of like we're going to invent a person called Fred who has the same regret, because I don't want it. It's going to be, I think, more instructive that way.
Okay.
So we got this guy Fred who has a busy marketing research agency, and he's missed Christmas plays and he missed some school events and so forth, and he regrets that because now his kids are older and he knows that window is closed. All right, so. Let's think about, the first step we think about the first step is internally. So how Fred talks to himself. And my guess is that Fred, being a high achieving guy, is pretty hard on himself. He's going to say, oh man, I'm such a shitty father. It's like what's wrong with my values, and actually talking to himself in a pretty harsh way. And what the evidence tells us is, Fred, don't do that. Okay. What you should be doing is treating yourself with kindness rather than contempt. Don't treat yourself better than anybody else, but don't treat yourself worse than anybody else. Because if a friend came to Fred with the same regret, Fred wouldn't say, "You asshole, you're such a terrible father." You wouldn't excoriate him the way that Fred is likely excoriating himself. So treat yourself with kindness rather than compassion. Don't treat yourself better than anybody else, but don't treat yourself worse than anybody else. And that's not a nice thing. We have 20 years of evidence in self-compassion showing that that's the way to do it. So that's internal. External. It's actually very important for Fred to talk about this regret, write about this regret, for two reasons. First, it is a way that disclosure takes a weight off of it, because Fred might have been carrying this around. So disclosure takes a weight off of it. The other thing is that by talking about the regret or writing about the regret, it actually makes it less menacing for Fred. Because right now, the regret is this kind of amorphous, blobby thing. But by converting it to language, it's more manageable. It's less menacing. It's a little bit more concrete, and you can begin to make sense of it. And then the final thing that Fred should do is looking forward, saying, "What's the lesson I learned from this?" What I learned from this is that spending time with my kids is actually really important, and there's a fleeting moment for that to happen. So I can't go back and undo any of the other stuff. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to prioritize the next meaningful gathering or event with my kids. That's going to be my priority. And if I have to sacrifice a work trip, that's what I'm going to do. And that's it. And so what we've done is we've taken this negative emotion and used it to shape our future decisions. And when we do that, Fred is going to be better off. And Fred is certainly going to be better off than the alternative, because what typically happens to the Freds of the world is that they either do one, if they're American, they ignore their regret. They put their fingers in their ears and say, "Oh, I need to be positive all the time." That's a bad strategy. That's going to collapse on you eventually. Or you can have Fred can wallow in the regret, ruminate on the regret. That's really bad too. What Fred should do is just look in the eye and say, "Hey, wait a second. I feel a little bit bad. What's this feeling telling me? This feeling is telling me what I value, and this feeling is giving me instruction for what I can do in the future."
Well, in a roundabout way, Dan, that's exactly what I remember. The moment where I was in Lake Tahoe with an American friend of mine and my wife, and I was saying, I'm trapped in this bubble, trapped on this wheel that I can't get off, running the agency, whatever, blah blah blah. And so I made the decision there and then to sell the agency.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So, but only through talking about it, through living it, and then making that choice. So you're right. I used the model, the framework, in order to get out of that situation. So it works.
Yeah, and most of us haven't been taught it. What we've been taught, especially Americans, we've been sold a bill of goods. We think that the secret to a good life is to be positive all the time, never be negative, to always look forward and never look back, and that's just not right. We want to be positive a lot of the time, but we want to actually learn from our negative emotions, and we do want to look back occasionally because and reflect on our previous decisions, because they can help us make better decisions in the future.
Yeah. Knowing what you know now, if you could send a message back to your younger teenage self about minimizing any, the big regrets you may have, what message would you send back? What regrets do you wish you'd made a different decision on?
Well, I'll answer that. I guess I can approach that two different ways. So one of them is, or three different ways. So one of them is that my teenage self was such an ass that I don't think he would listen to me. So I don't. I think the exercise. I think that the exercise itself is fraught. But let's leave that aside for a moment. The one thing that I would probably tell him is less about a regret than more about basically like stop spending time caring and thinking about what other people think of you, because they're not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. So just forget about that, and don't let that be a factor in how you navigate your life. The other regret that the other regret that I have, I'm sort of embarrassed by this, is that, but it's not irredeemable, is that I am not fluent in a second language. And I would have told my 16-year-old self, do something, do something where you can pick up a second language, and certainly do something more adventurous early on. So maybe don't go to university right away, and instead go live 2 years in another country where you can pick up a language. Don't go to university right away. Go serve in the military for 4 years and use that as a way to broaden your view of the world. So that's probably what I would tell him. But if I told my 16, 17-year-old self that, he would say, okay, old man, leave me alone.
Well, I've got a place in Mallorca. I've had it for a couple of years, and I'm telling my 51-year-old self that I still need to learn a second language, and I haven't done yet, and I feel terrible about it. But there's
You can do
still
it.
time.
You can
There's
do
still
it.
time.
You can do it. The other thing is that I mean, I think we're ways away from this, but perhaps over time, AI makes learning a second language less important. There's a couple of interesting technologies right now. They're pretty rudimentary that allow, let's say that you were speaking in Mallorca, you were speaking in Spanish, I was speaking in English. That would allow us to essentially wear each of us wear an earpiece, and I would speak in English, but you would hear it in Spanish, and you would speak in Spanish, and I would hear it in English.
It's coming. It's definitely coming, isn't it? Yeah. Dan, to finish off, some quickfire questions that I asked all my guests. My last guest was David Acker, been called the father of modern branding by Philip Kotler, no less. So published hundreds of books, hundreds of articles, 18 books on branding. And his question to you is, does building up or leveraging right brain talent give a person a way to be relevant in the AI age?
I think so. I think it's a little bit less than I wrote about in A Whole New Mind, a couple decades, whenever that was, a while ago. I think the key really is to do things that augment machine intelligence rather than compete with machine intelligence. And so AI is going to call for a set of, I think, very artistic skills, very right brain skills. So the skill of taste. So AI can generate, okay, here we go. Let's take branding. AI can generate 50 slogans for your brand, 500 slogans for your brand. They can generate 50 slogans for your brand. But you have to have the taste to know which is good and which is not.
Yeah.
So that becomes important. You're going to become you're going to become much more of a composer, so that that composition matters a huge amount. How do you compose a project? How do you compose a team? Composition, both in the musical sense, but also in the artistic sense, in the way that a painter, composes her canvas. Orchestration, you're going to be, more the skills of a conductor, so that you're going to be orchestrating both individuals and teams and AI agents. And so I think that a lot of these right brain skills are going to be important, but they're going to be things. It's going to be things like taste. It's going to be things like iteration. It's going to be things like orchestration. It's going to be things like composition. Those kinds of things are going to become much more important.
Yeah. Next, a couple of questions from listeners. So we're going all around the world for these. Firstly is from Marajul Islam in Dhaka in Bangladesh. And he asked, most people chase noise and not the truth. How do you pick the right question to chase?
Interesting. I'm not sure. I know the answer to that. I think the only sort of good answer that I could give to that is, the right questions to chase when you can't get it out of your head.
Right. Yeah. And you've taken some gut feel from all the, we've talked about today as well, in terms of
and you can't get it out of your head, and that the more that you investigate the answer, the more you want to go even deeper.
Yeah.
So there's certain kinds of things, you can think about a question as like a date. So there's some questions where you just want to go on a couple of dates, but there are other questions that you really want to go steady and then get married.
Yeah. Do you have a new book on the horizon, though?
I do not.
No. Next is from James Naples. He's in Needham in Massachusetts, and he asks, how do you suggest the future world should balance resource investments into humans in a world surrounded by hardware? If humans don't know how to use all the technology being introduced, does it really make the world any better?
It's another one where my real answer is I don't know. I think it's really I think it becomes the question. And I think it's a question that we have been wrestling with for. I don't think we've realized it, how much we're wrestling with the division of labor between humans and machines. I think that's always been the case. I think it's been the case since farming, but it's even more of a case now because it's changing so much. And I think there's some really interesting. I think there's some really interesting questions here about what do we have machines do and what do we have humans do, and the goal is not only efficiency, but it's also human potential. One of the things that you see, there's an interesting paper that came out about the brain, literally the brains of taxi drivers in London who knew the knowledge, had the knowledge, capital T, capital K, and then people who were also in transportation, but they were, say, pilots flying a prescribed route, or train conductors, bus drivers going a prescribed route. And it turned out that the taxi drivers who had that difficulty, who had that exertion cognitively, had more connections in their brains and were less likely to succumb to cognitive decline. And so we can analogize to that with some of these AI models. So I think there's a very strong argument to be made where, I got to give you an example. I have these contracts that I have to go through today, and I got them, and it's like they were kind of boring, but it's actually pretty important that I understand these contracts really well. It's not just the kind of thing where I can glance at it and sign it up. These are important for a whole host of reasons. So my initial thing was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put this in a large language model and say, summarize this contract and tell me what to do. And I said, you know what? This is not one of those situations. This is one of those situations where I'm going to have to read it through and really think about it. Maybe then I can do it. And so for me, it's like, for me, it's at a micro level. The question is, how much do I do with my brain, and how much do I do with these external machine-driven brains?
Yeah. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever been given?
I don't know if I've been given that much. I think. I mean, it's well known, but I think it's still true. Is I found it a revelation when someone said to me when I was very, very young. But under promise and over deliver.
Yeah. I back that. Being customer experience written.
Yeah. I mean, it's not new, but it's still pretty good advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Who'd you like me to reach out to and invite to come on this podcast in the future?
I would be really interested in hearing from people who were, who had worked at some of these big tech firms and whose conscience told them to leave. So it could be the person, one of the Meta whistleblowers. It could be the woman who wrote, I can't think of her name, who wrote Careless People. It could be one of the people who said, I don't think there are enough guardrails on what we're doing in AI. So I'd be curious about people who were in business, who were good in business, who had a chance to do even better in business, but whose moral code said, I need to go a different direction.
Well, I never know why Guy Kawasaki left Apple, but I don't think it was a moral thing in that sense.
Wow.
But the guy is an American marketing specialist, author, Silicon Valley venture capitalist, did work at Apple many moons ago, and he's my next guest. So what question would you like to leave for Guy?
Oh, okay. I mean, I like Guy quite a bit. I would ask him, what is the one thing that people believe about marketing that isn't true? Like, tell me where on marketing our instincts are wrong, our assumptions are wrong. So I'm less concerned about tell me 3 things to do, but tell me something that I'm doing now that where I'm wrong, or tell me something that I'm thinking now that is erroneous.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a few things that maybe you can mention there, but I'll ask that to him in the coming
Awesome.
weeks. I've shared how much of an influence that you've had on my career, Dan. So I could generally talk for another hour, but you've got some important contracts to look at there. So we'll have to stop it there. Your ideas have shaped how I've approached work and life in the past. And I know you've done the same for hundreds of thousands of other people. So thank you from me. Thank you from all of us for
Thank
the
you,
work
Nick. That's nice of you to say. I appreciate that. Maybe I will write another book now.
Well, we're speaking in December. This is going out in January. So here we are in January. Listeners, you're listening. If you're making any New Year's resolutions, then I'd say go out there, connect with Dan, LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever. There's new content each day. I just love to read it, watch it, and it makes you think differently and think smarter. So definitely do that. And outside of the socials, Dan, where would you recommend listeners to go outside danpink.com?
Yeah, you can go to danpink.com for everything. You can go to my YouTube channel, Daniel Pink TV. I'm pretty easy to find.
Yeah, you are. You definitely are. Well, thanks again for your time. Please to come back on the podcast if you ever do write another book. Well, you're welcome back anyway. But no, good luck with everything that you do in the future, Dan. And I'll be keeping a close eye because I have been doing since 2009. So thank you again.
All right, it's a pleasure, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Well, what can I say? An hour with Dan Pink is difficult to pull out just 3 powerful ideas because we covered so much. But I think looking back to his latest book, The Power of Regret, then here are my notes on 3 key takeaways that I remember from that particular part of the discussion. Firstly, regret is not a dangerous emotion to be avoided, but a vital cognitive signal. Regret makes us human and is one of our most common emotions. So treated properly, it can be one of our most valuable. It's a source of data about our values. So it really does show us what we truly care about. Secondly, I think the antidote to regret isn't ignoring it, but confronting it with structure. So structure it through disclosure, self-compassion, and the crucial scale of self-distancing, just to gain a perspective on that regret. And I think that's the key, and that's my third point, really. Give structure to your regrets so you can use them prospectively. And we can make better decisions today in our careers, our businesses, our lives by asking one simple, powerful question. What will I regret if I don't do this? And if you use a projection technique where you ask yourself, what would the situation look like in 5 or 10 years' time? This allows you to make the right decision in the here and now. If you haven't bought this book or even any of Dan's back catalogue of books, then I do encourage you to go and buy them as you won't be disappointed. Up next is Guy Kawasaki talking about his new book, Wiser Guy. So until then, thanks for tuning in.